TV soap news and spoilers say that in the quiet, manicured streets of the gated community of Willow Creek, where manicured lawns and pristine facades hid secrets as dark as the shadows cast by the towering oaks, a storm was brewing. The Dupree family, once the epitome of suburban perfection, was teetering on the edge of collapse. At the heart of this tempest was Ted Dupree, a man whose charm and good looks had long been his currency, but whose reckless choices were about to unravel everything he held dear. His wife, Nicole, was a woman of grace and resilience, but even she had her limits. And then there was Leslie, the cunning neighbor with a vendetta, whose actions would ignite a firestorm of drama that no one in Willow Creek could ignore. A family fractured. The Dupree household had always been the envy of Willow Creek. Nicole, with her poised demeanor and impeccable taste, was the kind of woman who could host a charity gala and still have time to bake cookies for the neighborhood kids. Ted, on the other hand, was the charismatic businessman whose easy smile and quick wit made him the life of every party. Together, they were a power couple, their 2 children completing the picture of suburban bliss. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Ted's indiscretions were not new. 2 years prior, Nicole had discovered his first affair with a coworker, a scandal that had rocked their marriage but not broken it. She had chosen forgiveness, believing that love and commitment could mend what was broken. The couple had attended therapy, made promises, and rebuilt, or so Nicole thought. But Ted's wandering eye had never truly settled, and his latest betrayal would push their relationship to the brink. The evening that changed everything began innocently enough. Nicole's family had gathered at the Dupree home for a dinner that was meant to be a celebration of her sister's engagement. The air was thick with laughter and the clinking of wine glasses, but for Ted, the night was a gauntlet. Nicole's family had never fully warmed to him, their subtle jabs and pointed questions a constant reminder of their disapproval. By the time dessert was served, Ted was seething, his pride bruised and his patience worn thin. Excusing himself under the pretense of work, he slipped out to the local bar, a place where he could drown his frustrations in whiskey and anonymity. The spark of betrayal. It was there, in the dim glow of the bar's neon lights, that Leslie found him. Leslie Monroe was no stranger to the Dupree family. A neighbor with a sharp tongue and a penchant for stirring trouble, she had long harbored a grudge against Nicole. Years ago, Nicole had unknowingly outshone Leslie at a community event, stealing the spotlight and, in Leslie's mind, her rightful place as Willow Creek's social queen. Since then, Leslie had made it her mission to undermine Nicole at every turn, her petty vendetta simmering beneath a veneer of politeness. Leslie had been at the bar that night, nursing a martini and scanning the room for opportunity. When she spotted Ted, slouched over his drink, his tie loosened and his eyes glassy with intoxication, she saw her chance. Eva, a mutual friend who had been at the Dupree dinner, had tipped her off about Ted's state, and Leslie wasted no time. She slipped out of the bar, her heels clicking against the pavement with purpose, and made her way to Ted's side. What happened next was as predictable as it was devastating. Leslie, with her calculated charm, leaned in close, her words dripping with honeyed malice. Ted, too drunk to think clearly, was an easy target. Their conversation turned flirtatious, then reckless, and before long, they were stumbling out of the bar together, her laughter echoing in the night. In a haze of alcohol and poor judgment, Ted followed Leslie to her sleek, modern home just a few streets away from his own. The door closed behind them, and with it, any chance of salvaging the night. The fallout. The next morning, as the sun rose over Willow Creek, Nicole was blissfully unaware of the betrayal that had unfolded. She was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast for her children, her thoughts on the day ahead. Ted had returned home in the early hours, claiming a late night at the office, and Nicole, ever trusting, had accepted his excuse without question. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and in Willow Creek, secrets rarely stayed buried. Eva, who had witnessed Leslie's swift exit from the bar, couldn't keep the gossip to herself. By mid-morning, she was on the phone with Nicole, her voice trembling with a mix of guilt and excitement. "Nicole, I don't know how to say this, she began, her words tumbling out in a rush. But last night, when Ted was at the bar, Leslie was there. She left with him. I don't know what happened, but it didn't look good. Nicole's world tilted. The spatula in her hand clattered to the counter, and the room seemed to close in around her. She had forgiven Ted once, had poured her heart into rebuilding their marriage, but this was a wound too deep to ignore. Her mind raced with images of Ted and Leslie, her neighbor, her rival, tangled together in a betrayal that felt like a knife to the heart. She thanked Eva for her honesty, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her, and hung up the phone. Leslie's triumph. Across the street, Leslie was reveling in her victory. She had no intention of keeping her conquest a secret. For Leslie, this wasn't just about Ted, it was about tearing down the Dupree family, piece by piece. She wasted no time spreading the word, her voice laced with smug satisfaction as she recounted the night to anyone who would listen. At the community center, during a yoga class, she dropped hints about her late-night visitor, her eyes glinting with malice as she watched the whispers spread. By the time the story reached Nicole, it had grown into a full-blown scandal, with Leslie at its center, basking in the chaos she had created. Leslie's pettiness knew no bounds. She sent Nicole a cryptic text, a single line that read, "Hope you're doing okay, neighbor. Let me know if you need to talk." The message was a taunt, a deliberate jab meant to twist the knife. Nicole read it, her hands shaking, and deleted it without responding. But the damage was done. The entire neighborhood was buzzing with the news, and Nicole could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Nicole's breaking point. For days, Nicole grappled with her emotions. She wanted to believe that Ted could change, that their love was worth fighting for. She thought of their children, of the life they had built together, and the promises they had made. But every time she looked at Ted, she saw Leslie's smug smile, heard the whispers of her neighbors, and felt the sting of betrayal all over again. She confronted Ted that evening, her voice calm but laced with steel. "Tell me the truth, Ted," she said, her eyes locked on his. "Did you sleep with Leslie?" Ted's face crumpled, his usual charm replaced by a look of desperation. He stammered, tried to deflect, but the truth was written in his eyes. "Nicole, it was a mistake," he said, his voice breaking. "I was drunk, I wasn't thinking. It didn't mean anything." But to Nicole, it meant everything. It was the final straw, the moment when forgiveness felt like surrender. She turned away from him, her heart hardening. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "I deserve better." The battle lines drawn. The days that followed were a blur of pain and resolve. Nicole threw herself into protecting her children, shielding them from the gossip that swirled around Willow Creek. She met with a lawyer, began researching her options, and steeled herself for the fight ahead. Ted, meanwhile, was a shadow of his former self, his guilt and shame isolating him from the community he had once charmed. But Leslie wasn't done. She thrived on the chaos, her vendetta against the Duprees fueling her every move. She organized a neighborhood barbecue, inviting everyone but pointedly excluding Nicole and her family. At the event, she played the gracious hostess, all while dropping subtle barbs about broken homes and straying husbands. The neighbors, caught up in the drama, ate it up, their whispers growing louder with each passing day. Nicole, however, was not one to be underestimated. She had spent years building her life in Willow Creek, and she wasn't about to let Leslie destroy it. She began to fight back in her own way, quietly rallying her true friends and refusing to let Leslie's pettiness define her. She volunteered at the community center, organized a fundraiser for the local school, and showed the neighborhood that she was stronger than the scandal that threatened to consume her. A community divided. As the weeks turned into months, Willow Creek became a battleground. Sides were chosen, alliances formed, and the once idyllic community was fractured by the fallout of Ted's betrayal. Some stood by Nicole, admiring her grace under pressure, while others were drawn to Leslie's charisma and the allure of her gossip. Ted, caught in the middle, became a pariah, his reputation in tatters. The question on everyone's mind was whether Nicole and Ted's marriage could survive. Nicole wrestled with this question daily, torn between her love for the man she had married and the reality of his repeated betrayals. She thought of the life they had built, the memories they shared, and the children who still needed their father. But she also thought of herself, of the woman she had been before Ted's lies had chipped away at her confidence. Could she rebuild her life without him? Could she find happiness again? The road ahead. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves fell like embers from the trees, Nicole stood on her porch, staring out at the quiet streets of Willow Creek. The neighborhood, once a symbol of her dreams, now felt like a battlefield. But in that moment, she made a decision. She would not let Leslie's pettiness or Ted's betrayal define her. She would fight for herself, for her children, and for the life she deserved. Whether that life included Ted was a question only time could answer. For now, Nicole was focused on reclaiming her strength, rebuilding her heart, and proving to Willow Creek, and to herself, that she was more than the sum of her scars. The gates of Willow Creek might hide secrets, but they could not contain the resilience of a woman determined to rise above. As for Leslie, her moment of triumph was fleeting. Her actions had won her attention, but they had also exposed her cruelty. The neighbors who had once laughed at her gossip began to see her for what she was, a woman consumed by bitterness, willing to destroy others to feel powerful. And in a community built on appearances, that was a fatal flaw. The story of Ted, Nicole, and Leslie was far from over. In Willow Creek, where every smile hid a story and every gate concealed a secret, the drama was just beginning. Would Nicole find the strength to walk away from Ted? Would Leslie's vendetta consume her? And would Ted ever find redemption?